What I intend to talk about this afternoon is we will talk about the big picture kind of approach with implementing firearm protocols and best practices and things like that from more of a national big picture perspective. And then we'll move on to talk about what we do in my jurisdiction and kind of use that as a little bit of a case study, a little bit of an example of maybe some things that we're doing right, maybe some things that we're not doing right, and you guys can learn from that like we've learned throughout the years from the mistakes and things that we've made. We'll talk about our approach to gun crime, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with a summary of some other best practices and suggestions that we've kind of developed throughout the years. So to begin with, my name is Brandon Huntley. I'm a sergeant with the Phoenix Police Department in Arizona, down on the southwest border of the United States. And I've been with the department since 1994, and I've been working with the NIBIN program for about going on 5 years now, and we have a real strong partnership with ATF as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about Phoenix here in a few minutes, but with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And I do have a lot of slides, so hopefully you guys will have some questions. If we could just hold those to the end, let me get through everything, and then we can address questions if you do have any at the end. I like to open these presentations up with these perf statistics. The Police Executive Research Forum did a study that they published last year on the actual cost of gun crime, and so we're all working in law enforcement. We're all well aware of the cost of the crime in terms of the victimization, and that's what's most important, what happens to these victims and their families. But it's kind of staggering when you look at these actual numbers of what each gun-related crime costs to investigate in the United States, and it's pretty staggering when you look at these numbers. And what I think is important with that is, in law enforcement, we're really geared toward trying to prevent crime. Ultimately, I mean, we want to do a thorough investigation, but if we can prevent these crimes in our jurisdictions, this is the money that we could be saving for each gun-related crime, and then we could then turn around and use those funds for personnel, equipment, things like that. So in the day and age of all these budget cuts and economic issues, this is kind of important stuff. They did kind of a cross-section across the United States as well, and these numbers, I don't even know. I'm just a lowly sergeant with the Phoenix Police Department. I'm not a mathematician. What is that, like 43 gazillion? I don't even know what that number is. It's just staggering. That's a big number. And then they looked at crime in 1 week in selected cities, and actually Toronto. Anyone from Toronto here? No? All right. Toronto was included in that also. So just in 1 week, over $38 million was spent to investigate gun-related crime. So I like to open up with that on these presentations. I'm kind of used to presenting to different size groups. Sometimes I'll be in a group of 200, and then other times I'll be at a community meeting, and it'll literally be in someone's house. And it'll be a smaller group than this. There might be 3 or 4 people, so I enjoy actually the smaller groups. So why do we want to adopt a regional approach? And this is just covering the same ground that we've covered for almost the last 3 days here, so a lot of this is going to be a little bit of review. It's things that we've talked about for the last several days. But as we've seen, the armed criminals today are mobile, and evidence of their crimes is easily dispersed across police districts, cities, states, and international borders. And we'll highlight in Phoenix, where we're right on the southwest border with Mexico. So that definitely impacts us where we're at. And because an investigator's degree of success in solving a murder in one city can be dependent on what an officer in the next town over does or does not do with the crime gun or spent casing. And in my role as a sergeant with the Phoenix Police Department, I supervise a group of detectives and sworn and civilian personnel. Our primary role is to investigate gun crimes, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. And we also work with our home invasion and kidnapping enforcement unit, so we work on those kinds of cases as well. And what we see day in and day out is that the patrol officers responding to these things, it's so important, the evidence that they collect, the questions that they ask on the front end, and they don't really understand that what they do on the front end not only dramatically can impact that case, but can have an impact on connecting these crimes to other cases as well. And what they ask or don't ask and what information they get, even when a suspect lies to us, that's valuable information. We've had cases where we lock them into a story as to when they purchased the gun, and we know it's not true, and that's as valuable as if they gave us a confession sometimes. So much of what we'll be talking about today is based on the regional crime gun protocols, and I gave you guys a handout. Those of you that just came in, I'll get it to you here in a minute. I have to talk into this mic because they're recording, so when we're showing a video, I'll give you the handouts. But at the last IACP conference in San Diego last fall, they adopted these best practices and of crime gun protocols that they recommend now for all law enforcement agencies. And it's nice to have an international group like this that's saying this is what we feel are best practices and what agencies should be following. And really, it's the 13 critical tasks. If you read it, it's almost verbatim from Pete Gagliardi and forensic technology, so it just kind of shows you how out front forensic technology is with this. But I gave you a copy of those protocols. Those are available, that resolution, and that's available on their website as well. So on these regional crime gun protocols, they provide law enforcement with timely and actionable information to help identify and apprehend armed suspects quickly, denying them the opportunity to offend, and help perfect stronger criminal cases against them. And the IACP views this as a best practice kind of model for the investigation of firearm-related crimes. Excuse me. And it encourages all of us to come to the table together to kind of agree upon these practices and try to get them implemented in whatever jurisdiction that you work. So what are some of these protocols? Again, it's the same kind of stuff that we've been talking about the last 3 days. The thorough investigation of each gun crime, NCIC transactions, i.e. stolen or recovered. In the United States, that's what we run them through. If you're from another country or jurisdiction, you might call it something differently, but you want to, at a minimum, be running those guns, making sure that they're stolen. In the United States, in the NCIC system, if we tow a vehicle and we're storing it, we have to enter that into NCIC. And the reason is the owner comes home or they see that their vehicle is gone, they're going to assume that it's stolen, right? They parked it, maybe it's in a no parking zone, it gets towed. If you don't enter that into NCIC, then they call it in, it gets reported stolen, and now it's in the system. Then when the owner gets their car back, they're driving down the street and they're getting yanked out by us on a felony stop because it's been reported stolen. So we're mandated to do that for vehicles, but not for firearms. The same thing applies with firearms. In the United States, we have the ability to enter all impounded firearms into NCIC as a recovered firearm. And the same kind of principle would apply. Homeowner comes home, realizes that their gun's stolen. If it's entered into NCIC from, let's say, a traffic stop a week before, you'll be able to link that up, and now you have some good suspect information. But a lot of agencies, including Phoenix PD, aren't doing that. So things like that are really, really important and can really help us with our investigations. Comprehensive crime gun traces through E-Trace. Again, that's what we call it in the United States. Jim and Pete did their presentation this morning. I think you probably have a good handle on E-Trace. Again, your jurisdiction might have a different system, but that's what it's called in the United States. The timely entry of test fires and evidence into NIBIN or IBIS. Again, we call it NIBIN. Other countries refer to it as IBIS. The collection and analysis of DNA and fingerprints off of these items, and we know spent shell casings, not so much, but on the guns themselves. And then the follow-up of the intelligence from the protocols, which is what ATF is really promoting now in their new mindset with all of this. So 2 key questions to ask. Does your agency have up-to-date internal directives in place to embed these protocols? And do you have an MOA or MOU among the agencies in the region that addresses them? In Phoenix, we don't have these. We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants with a lot of this stuff. And we're a high-volume site, and we're doing some things really good, but these are some areas that we need to address in our area. And the internal directives, I can't say enough as to how important those are. But again, it's a work in progress for our agency. Hopefully your jurisdictions, you have these things. But to get that regional approach in areas like Palm Beach County in Florida, where as a result of a 13 critical tasks workshop several years ago, and it's mentioned in Pete's book in the 13 critical tasks as a best practice, they implemented that. They have a whole county-wide protocol now in place. So stuff like that is really important. And like Pete says, if you don't have these things in place, your program's not sustainable. And he gets on me about that all the time. We were doing workshops just a couple weeks ago, and he was getting on me. And I'm like, Pete, I know, we're trying to get there. Another reference that I am a big proponent of is this IACP firearms guide. They've been real good about providing copies of this for me. Unfortunately, I don't have any with me today, these nice copies, but it is available on their webpage. And I really encourage you, if you're not familiar with this, to go to the IACP webpage and download this in a PDF, print it out. And this is what when I go do these presentations to groups, especially chief groups with command staff people, and I'll have an IACP conference next week, much of what we talk about is based upon what's provided in this guide in terms of best practices and strategies and programs and taking a collaborative approach. It's an outstanding reference guide that I highly recommend. I wouldn't worry about writing down the whole address there. If you go to the IACP webpage, or if you actually just like Google IACP Firearms Guide, this should pop up and you should find it. If you can't, yeah, you'll get the CD on there as well. But if you, I'll give you my contact information too, and I can email it to you. I'll also be talking, much of what we're talking about here today, the past 3 days, is all in Pete's book as well. So if you haven't read that, obviously everyone has a copy now. I highly recommend reading through that, and that's what we should all be following. Okay, so that's kind of the big picture, broad perspective. Let's talk a little bit about what we're doing in Phoenix and what our approach is. Just some pictures of Phoenix there. If you're not familiar with Arizona, we're down here in the southwest United States. We share a border with Mexico. We're right on the southwest border, 4 states that border Mexico. So we have a lot of transnational crime-related issues that are really important to us in Phoenix. In Mexico, we've talked about the drug trade, the cartels and things like that we're dealing with, and that is spreading over into the United States. And a lot of what we deal with in the United States is a spillover with regard to the human smuggling, drug smuggling, gun smuggling, ammunition smuggling. So really down in Arizona, we're right at the forefront on this transnational border, and it's really important to us. City of Phoenix is divided into 8 different precincts. Geographically, we're actually larger than the city of Los Angeles. Population-wise, we're not, but the size of Phoenix is actually bigger than Los Angeles, so we're pretty spread out. City of Phoenix is the 6th largest city in the United States, almost 1.5 million population. We're down to about 2,900 sworn now. At our heyday, we were probably 3,300. We haven't hired an officer in 4 years, I believe, and we're not going to be hiring officers for years to come because of budget issues with our city. So we're struggling. We're all having to take on a lot more responsibilities and duties as a result. Overall crime rate, we're 6th in terms of the top 10 cities by population. These next couple slides, just to kind of highlight what we are facing in Arizona with regard to gun crime, guns in general. This video will kind of give you a perspective of how much people in Arizona and the United States like their guns.
The tragedy in Newtown has reignited the gun debate nationwide. Here in Arizona, we've had our fair share of interesting gun law proposals. Guns on college campuses, guns in bars. Tonight, the straight story on a gun law that's raising some questions. Elizabeth Irwin is live from a location that you might call appropriate for this report. Elizabeth, where are you?
Well, Catherine, if you've spent any time in downtown Phoenix, you might know about this sculpture that you see near Central and Roosevelt. It's actually made up of 8,000 pounds of metal taken from weapons used in violent acts here in Arizona. The law we want to tell you about would take the guns used for this sculpture and put them right back out on the street.
Arizona is known for a few things: our beautiful sunsets, the wonderful weather for Christmas shopping, and we're also known as a state that really likes its guns. Second Amendment aside, this law really caught our attention. It says all legal deadly weapons taken by police in crimes be sold back to the public within a year. We're talking guns, explosives, knives, you name it.
Oh, it's outrageous. The legislature should be ashamed of themselves.
Lily Sizau works with Arizonans for Gun Safety.
We are a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to reducing gun deaths and injuries in Arizona communities.
When she heard crime guns are being sold back to the public, she had a few choice words for your lawmakers.
There are 300 million guns in this country in circulation. There are plenty of weapons out there for people to choose from. There's plenty of licensed gun dealers for people to go purchase weapons. There is no reason, there's no excuse that the legislature in this state should hamstring law enforcement agencies and force them to put crime guns back in circulation.
We reached out to the lawmakers who sponsored the bill to find out why. They didn't get back to us. The governor's office explained our state has been selling back crime guns since 2010. This new law requires that sale to happen less than a year after they're taken by police. Her spokesperson also said, quote, Governor Brewer is a strong but sensible supporter of the Second Amendment. She has always balanced her support of gun rights with public safety, as she demonstrated in the last 2 years by vetoing bills that would have legalized the carrying of firearms into public buildings and college campuses.
It's also important to note the guns would be sold by licensed dealers, so any potential buyers would have to undergo a criminal background check before they could purchase. So what do you think? Hit us up on Facebook and Twitter and let us know. Reporting live in downtown Phoenix, Elizabeth Irwin, CBS 5 News.
Turning them back to its rightful owner are going to be sold back out onto the street, which to me, working with NIBIN like I have for the last many years, that to me makes it even that much more important to get these into NIBIN before they go back out onto the street and get them entered as a test fire return, because we've actually gotten at least one hit that I know of that we're working right now off of one of those test fire returns, and that'll give you a point to start once that gun starting to be used in crimes again, as some of these will once they go back out there. This next video, just kind of to illustrate some of the violent groups that we're dealing with in the Phoenix area. This is a narco corrido, and in the Mexican culture, this song basically, or narco corridos are basically written and sung to glamorize those that are involved in drug smuggling, human smuggling, those types of things. So they're kind of held in high regard. This is on YouTube. This is a group that our Home Invasion and Kidnapping Enforcement Unit is actually currently we're working on getting this group identified and tracked and finding what they're up to. So this will kind of highlight that.
Sé que por el sur me han visto otros que hay allá.
So that just kind of illustrates some of the organized criminal element that we're dealing with in the along the southwest border there in the Phoenix area. These groups are involved in pretty much one of 4 categories: human smuggling, drug smuggling, ammunition smuggling, or gun smuggling, or all 4, as you'll see later on some other examples. Also in Phoenix and in the United States, we have a lot of gun shows. Gun shows are very popular. And so at these gun shows, you'll have licensed firearms dealers, but you'll also have private sellers, because it's legal to buy and sell guns by private parties, as long as you're not engaged in the business of firearms transactions. Then you'd need a firearms license. This is some video from a gun show that we worked. We try to work these in a proactive capacity in partnership with ATF. And basically what we're watching for here is, like in this individual here, she's holding the gun. He's providing her with, I think he purchased some ammo there. So that to us is suspicious. We're looking for straw purchase type things, and this is kind of telling us why is, does she really look like that gun belongs to her? Why is she carrying it? So those are some of the things that we're watching for. So gun shows are very popular in the United States and in Arizona in particular. So just an idea of what we're dealing with in Phoenix there. So I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly, because I think everybody has a real good handle on what NIBIN is all about. And so, like Pete likes to say, that every gun tells a story, and I think that's a very powerful message, but I also like to throw in there evidence scene casings too, because I've seen in my experience with NIBIN or IBIS that there tends to be an overemphasis on getting the guns into the database and not as much on the scene casings. And then we wonder why our hit percentage might be a little low. Well, that's probably why, because there's an overemphasis on getting these guns in there, whereas what are those guns going to hit to? They're going to hit to those scene casings. And those scene casings, as we well know, you're likely not going to get valuable DNA or prints off of those unless you think the suspects handled them afterward or they're laying in some kind of bodily fluid. So those should be getting in as a top priority. So as you know, NIBIN allows that, or IBIS allows that story to be heard. We all know NIBIN is what we call it in the United States, National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. Your country, your jurisdiction might call it something differently, but it's the same technology. It's using the IBIS product. So in the United States, this is deployed by ATF to agencies throughout the United States. I think these numbers are probably a little off at this point. Do you know the actual numbers, Jim? Is that pretty close? More about 170 now, because of some budget things and some sites being removed. We all know, we're all familiar with the images and what it does, and it goes to the server and it comes back with possible matches. And we're looking at the breech face, the firing pin. We've all seen the great new 3D technology that FTI is rolling out, that we're all very excited about having that added to our repertoire. And we're all familiar with this, matching up the images. In the United States, it's divided into regions. In Arizona, our entries only automatically correlate against other entries in Arizona. But this is where the crime gun intelligence plays such an important role, and having that information is so important. In Arizona, in Phoenix, we don't have the ability to get a lot of the intel because of the volume that we're dealing with, and I'll talk about that in detail here in a minute. But in an ideal world, you'd want to have that suspect information, you'd want to have that trace information before you did that entry. So for example, I test fire a gun, but the e-trace information says that gun was purchased 2 years ago in Texas. So as the NIBIN tech now, when I do that entry, I know I'm going to let it automatically correlate, but I probably want to manually correlate it to Texas and New Mexico. That's taking that technology to the next level. Or you see that suspect may have been from Missouri. So you might want to manually correlate to that region as well. So that's taking that to the next level and implementing the crime gun intelligence strategies that ATF is promoting. This slide just shows the number of sites around the United States, just to show that it is deployed throughout the country. These are some facts from ATF. These are a little old. You get John on those to get them updated to me tomorrow. We'll get that tomorrow. Yeah. You're funny. All right, we're almost done. You could see over 1.8 million cartridge case acquisitions, but again, this is kind of highlighting my point here. As of last year, 1.3 million test fire casings in there, but only 500,000 evidence scene casings. So quite a disparity there. We all know that FTI deploys this technology throughout the world. It's in over 60 countries. Here in North America, we've got the network in Canada, we've got the network in Mexico, and so really powerful opportunities once we get the connectivity going between Canada and Mexico. For us in Arizona, obviously we're going to be primarily concerned with getting that connection to Mexico, and we heard the great presentation from the Mexican representatives and how many systems they have down there. Working in Arizona, I'm extremely excited about the opportunity to be linked up between the United States and Mexico here in the coming months or years. In Arizona, there's 4 NIBIN sites, Phoenix, Mesa, and MCSO, Maricopa County, up in the Phoenix metropolitan area, and Tucson down south. Phoenix, we're probably about 3 hours from the border, about 2 hours from Tucson. So close proximity to the border there. Tucson's an hour or less to the border. The history with our department, it started off like with most agencies in the crime lab, and we found that our crime lab, they just couldn't keep up with the volume that's needed with a large agency like Phoenix to make it a valuable program. We started in 2002. You could see we only had about 200 entries. Our initial success was very limited because our firearm staff is busy with all the other stuff that their level of expertise is needed for, the direct comparisons, the tool mark stuff, the serial number restoration, all that good stuff. So what the approach our department took in 2006, they created a squad outside of the crime lab made up of sworn detectives to try to increase the volume of entries into the database. And you can see that our entries and our hits increased. We had a lot more success. In 2008, my lieutenant had a inspections report done because she came to the assaults unit where this was housed, and she didn't have a good handle on NIBIN. And in a nutshell, they found some issues, some organizational things that needed to be shored up. So I got brought in to kind of get things moving, get things a little bit better organized. And since that time, we've had a little bit more success. With our department, we take in 5,000 guns a year or more is what we've averaged the last few years. We're doing some buybacks in partnership with Arizonans for Gun Safety this month. Actually, this Saturday will be the last of the 3 buybacks that they had planned. We've already taken in over 1,000, I think around 1,000 guns. They just got another donation, huge donation for Saturday, so I expect that they may get a lot more guns on Saturday. So we'll see there. So that'll throw our numbers off a little bit this year. And then we get about 500 or more departmental reports with evidence scene casings every year. Right now, our structure is that we have myself, a sworn sergeant. We have 5 detectives, 2 of which are special deputies with ATF, which helps us to enforce federal firearms laws, has a good partnership with ATF, gives us a better ability to enforce the federal and state firearm laws, having that ability. We have a squad secretary, but what's interesting, and again, Pete would harp on me with this, is that the way that we're making it work at this point is that it's actually down to 7 volunteers now and 4 reserve officers. If you're not familiar with the reserve officer concept, that's basically a sworn peace officer that's a volunteer. So they go through, they get certified as a police officer, but they are not paid. They're a volunteer. A lot of our reserve officers are actually retired officers, but some actually are people that are interested in law enforcement and just want to volunteer their time. So I have about double the amount of staff that's unpaid as I have paid employees. And so what Pete gets on me is that that's not sustainable, and I know that, but that's how we're making it work at this point. And our volunteers actually do entries. I've gotten them certified. They help us with the entries. They help us in a variety of areas. So they're a huge part of what we're doing. Our squad, our primary role is to investigate gun-related crimes, and we get the misconduct involving weapon cases. Primarily what our bread and butter is with prohibited possessors, so people that are prohibited from possessing a firearm because they're a convicted felon, most times is what would usually make them a prohibited possessor. Those cases come to us. The shots fired into the air type cases. In Arizona now, we passed a law a couple years ago that if you're 21 or older, you can carry a concealed firearm. So we don't see a lot of the concealed cases anymore, but we used to have a lot of those. We get about 1,300 plus cases a year. We were actually up to almost 1,500 cases last year. So between 5 detectives that we had last year to try to handle 1,500 cases and run our NIBIN program and help out with home invasion and kidnapping cases as well is pretty daunting challenge. Some of the hike detectives, the home invasion and kidnapping detectives, are now taking the gun cases too. So that's helped us out quite a bit. They've been doing that since December. We also try to work in a proactive undercover capacity. You saw like the gun shows as an example, but there's a lot of other potential proactive work that we can do, internet gun sales, things like that, prohibited customers that are selling guns to pawn shops, things of that nature. We try to be proactive with cases like that. So this slide here just shows what a diverse abilities our group has. So we do a NIBIN shoot, and we invite other agencies to go out that we deal with. So we've kind of standardized it. Fire guns throughout the rest of the month, but so you could see we did a couple with a bunch of other agencies out to help out with numerous warrants and seizures. Our drug had served a search warrant where they seized arms. We got called out to that. Out to assist patrol officers with an undercover operation in the late afternoon, and then did 2 test fire requests for our assault. This is a pretty typical house in a Phoenix suburb or a neighborhood out in the west part of Phoenix. This was actually from July 4th of last year. Some neighborhood enforcement officers saw this vehicle. It was suspicious. They got him stopped in the driveway. They took the driver into custody. There was a small amount of marijuana residue in the trunk of the car. They went and knocked on the door to the house, and people are bailing out all over. There's probably 10, 12 people that they took into custody. They were all here illegally. Some of them probably just got into that house within the last several hours. When they went inside the house, this is some of what they discovered. And you can see here, there's 2 assault rifles in this package, 2 assault rifles in this package. They were each wrapped up in here, and this was bundled. There was a sling over here. Those were going to be trafficked back across the border, probably on foot. Ammunition smuggling is a huge, huge issue as well that we're dealing with in our jurisdiction down along the southwest border, so it's not just the guns. One of these assault rifles was stolen from a home invasion, armed robbery murder that occurred in Tempe just about 4, 5, 6 months prior to that. So again, talk about the interconnectivity and sharing of information. We found that obviously by running it into NCIC. It was actually the victim's gun that was stolen from that. The names that are written on these packages were significant. So we had that one a month later, pretty much a mirror image, different location, same type of situation. They go into the house, take a bunch of people into custody. This is what they find inside. This is significant also, tracking it back to cartel-related individuals in Mexico. But you see the ammunition there. These houses had all 4. Human smuggling, drug smuggling, ammunition smuggling, gun smuggling. One of the individuals taken into custody on this turned out he was here illegally, but had an Arizona driver's license. So one of our detectives started looking into that, got with MVD, our motor vehicle department, and they identified a MVD employee who was making these IDs for these people at several $1,000s a piece. And we stumbled on this huge ring that was doing these MVD fraudulent IDs and giving them legitimate IDs to people who were here illegally. So that's been a long-term case that one of our detectives has been working, so we kind of delve into that as well. So just to kind of illustrate some of the things that we're dealing with in Arizona, Phoenix in particular, and again, how it's connected to other jurisdictions and even other countries. In terms of our structure on the NIBIN side, our crime lab, which is across the street, brand new state-of-the-art facility, been open a few years. They have a system over there, and then we have 2 systems in our office, which is in the basement of police headquarters, which is directly across the street. So we have 2 entry stations and 3 analysis stations in our work unit, and 1 entry and 1 analysis station in the crime lab. We, wherever I go and speak, especially across the country, people kind of point to our program, and they kind of hold us kind of in high regard in terms of our relationship with the crime lab, because a lot of agencies, I guess, don't have that kind of relationship with it between the investigators and their crime lab. And so I hear good things about that, because we have such a great partnership with our crime lab, and we work very closely with them, and they're a huge, important part of our NIBIN program. We have firearms examiner staff. We have 9 firearms examiners and 1 basically NIBIN tech, but he fills in a lot of different roles. So this next slide that I'm going to show is a video that we use, and I could basically probably do the presentation by just showing you the video, and I'm in that too, so I apologize in advance. But it kind of highlights our NIBIN program, what we're doing, and then how we've taken a regional approach, so we'll talk about that for the remainder of the time. But it also highlights a success story through the use of NIBIN. Did you want to get the volume? If a case involves a casing or a gun, think NIBIN. Hello, I'm Brandon Huntley, Sergeant with the NIBIN Squad. NIBIN is the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. It's a program coordinated through ATF that can help link cases involving firearms and evidence scene casings. This is how it works. Firearms make marks like fingerprints on shell casings as they're fired out of the weapon. These marks can be photographed and traced. First, the photo. IBIS and brass tracks are the equipment that digitally photographs the marks. Then, the trace. NIBIN is the regional and national database that stores the photos of the marks and makes comparisons to track the weapons. Since joining the NIBIN program in 2002, the Phoenix Police Department has identified hundreds of hits that have linked cases and solved crimes. These hits have connected cases not only in Phoenix, but to other jurisdictions in the Phoenix metropolitan area and the state of Arizona. Here is an example of how NIBIN linked crimes committed in 3 different cities.
I'm Lana Laker. Welcome to this edition of The Last 24 for Tuesday, April 20th. Back in August of 2006, a home invasion robbery occurred at 5039 East Salinas Street in Phoenix, where the suspects tied up an elderly couple and stole their vehicle, a camera, and cash. The following day, a man was murdered at 5015 East Paseo Way in Phoenix when he was shot in the back as he tried to run to safety. These 2 crimes were located just 3 miles apart in the Ahwatukee neighborhood. In September of 2006, police in Mesa responded to a drive-by shooting where they found a victim with a gunshot wound to his leg, and they recovered expended 9mm and .22 caliber cartridge cases as evidence. 8 days later, someone in a Hyundai pointed a gun at people in another car in Tempe, and a short time later, Tempe police pulled over a Hyundai driven by Jessica Zambrano. Among those in the vehicle with Zambrano were Dion Powell and Andre McKee. Police seized 2 9mm pistols and a .22 caliber pistol from Zambrano's car. 2 days later, Mesa police detectives interviewed Zambrano about the drive-by shooting, and she implicated herself and others, including Dion Powell. She also identified the guns used in the drive-by to be the guns that were seized from her car during the traffic stop in Tempe. In December of 2006, the cartridge cases evidence from the Mesa drive-by shooting was compared to the guns seized from Zambrano's car found during the traffic stop in Tempe. The information was entered into the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network database by the Mesa Police Crime Lab, and the .22 caliber pistol and one of the 9mm pistols were linked to the Mesa drive-by shooting. On December 12, 2006, Mesa Police, searching the NIBIN database, identified a possible match between one of the pistols seized in Zambrano's car stop and the .22 caliber cartridge cases from the murder in Ahwatukee on Paseo Way. The match was later confirmed as a NIBIN hit by the Phoenix Police Crime Lab. In January 2007, Phoenix police detectives interviewed Zambrano, and she named Dion Powell as the shooter in the Paseo Way murder and named Michael Morton and Andre McKee as co-conspirators. She also implicated them all in the home invasion robbery of the elderly couple in Ahwatukee. Dion Powell received life in prison with possibility of parole in 25 years. Michael Martin received 20 years in prison. Andre McKee received 17 years in prison. And Jessica Zambrano received 10.5 years in prison. This is a great example of how the NIBIN technology assists police to work across jurisdictions to solve crimes and send the bad guys to prison.
Currently, there are 3 agencies in Maricopa County that enter data into and maintain NIBIN systems: Phoenix, Mesa, and MCSO. Our Metro program, in partnership with ATF, enables more agencies to use this valuable investigative tool. As a result, personnel from across the Phoenix metropolitan area now enter evidence into the NIBIN database. Phoenix PD is unique in having 3 active NIBIN workstations, all located in downtown Phoenix. Participating agencies send their trained personnel to enter and analyze evidence into the NIBIN database using these stations. The more entries into NIBIN, the more hits and leads will be generated. NIBIN utilizes an exclusive technology that can link crimes in a way never before possible. By increasing the number of agencies using NIBIN, it becomes a stronger weapon to fight crime. Each agency will establish its own policies for entering evidence into the NIBIN database. These policies will determine which guns will be test fired. They will also identify scene casings that will be entered into NIBIN. When a possible match is identified, a firearms examiner will perform a confirmation with the actual evidence. Each agency will work with its designated crime lab to confirm the NIBIN match. For more information, consult these resources. When you're processing a scene involving firearms or evidence scene casings, think NIBIN. The rest of these slides here pretty quickly. But that murder that occurred, we were looking in a totally different direction, and if it wasn't for the use of NIBIN and agencies working together, would likely still be unsolved today. So we'll talk about that a little bit more here toward the end. So our regional approach that we've adopted, basically what had happened is agencies kept coming to us saying, hey, can you help us get our evidence into NIBIN? And we couldn't even keep up with our incoming volume, let alone our backlog. So basically I reached out to ATF, said, hey, listen, if these guys get their people trained, can they come in and use our systems? And ATF said, absolutely. So what we did is we held a first round of training almost 3 years ago, June of 2010. We had 12 people from 11 different agencies that got trained and certified and now started coming in and doing their entries using our systems, because we're not using them 24/7, so we'd like to get the most out of them, and we've invested a lot of money into these systems, so we want to get the most out of them for that reason, and also for the community and the public. I think we owe it to them. So we've had additional agencies that have joined since that time. This is just kind of a brief recap on what's been done in the years since. A lot more information sharing, and again, when you think of NIBIN, NIBIN really is an intelligence database just based on the entering of physical items of evidence. Because behind every gun, behind every evidence scene casing, there's valuable information in that report, in that trace, that you're going to get at by entering those items into NIBIN. So it's a very powerful investigative intelligence tool, the way that I've looked at it all these years. In August of last year, we've held additional training sessions throughout the years. This was kind of groundbreaking. I don't think anyone's had 2 weeks worth of training where they got that many people trained. 22 people representing 10 law enforcement agencies throughout Arizona, including Border Patrol. They're phenomenal. They've joined up with the program. Once they learned about it, they're like, we've got to get on board with this. So they're working with Tucson PD down in Tucson to get their guns test fired and entered. This just illustrates our number of entries throughout the years and how they've increased dramatically. Our crime lab can typically confirm 70, 80 hits a year. We got about 50 that are awaiting confirmation right now. One important thing to note is, I think Jim touched on it this morning, as soon as you make that possible hit identification, even before it's confirmed, you need to notify the detectives. You need to make sure that specify, hey, this is just possible, it's not confirmed yet, but you need to let those detectives know. and we let them know as soon as we can, and we'll give them a recap of the cases, because there's investigative follow-up that can and should be done at that point. And a lot of times we'll look at that report and we'll see, oh, this is going to be a match. I don't even need it confirmed. I mean, we'll still confirm it, but there may be important evidence that they need to get, video surveillance, things like that. So very important to make that notification right up front. These slides I'm going to have to go through rather quickly, so I apologize. This just kind of highlights our successes throughout the years, and you can see 4,000 guns test fired at our NIBIN shoots in 2010. Held a 13 critical tasks workshop in 2010. Highly recommend taking advantage of FTI's offer to do that. It's a phenomenal opportunity to bring everyone to the table. We'll talk about that here in a minute on a workshop that we just did. In 2011, again, more success, more information sharing. We had an interesting hit that came up. One of our retiring detectives was working, I had him working on NIBIN hits before he left, and he found a series of 7 hits, and he started looking at it, and this guy was a real, he was out there doing a lot of bad stuff. And the NIBIN hits didn't result in his arrest for any of those particular incidents, but when Dennis looked at one of the cases, this guy had gone out, he'd gotten into a road rage incident, and shot off, I think he had shot at another vehicle. Well, when the officers responded, they searched his car, and in his car, they found a camera, and on that camera was a video, and I'll show you what was on that video. I don't need the sound for this one. And there actually is, he's basically saying, show me how you point the gun at mommy. And that gun, as you guys can see, if it'll play again for me, it recycles, is a Glock with an extended magazine. You can see him in the mirror if I stopped it at the right place. So just from that little 2 to 3 second video, we were able to arrest both of those parents for child abuse. So kind of an outside of the box application for a NIBIN hit. Haven't seen that one before or since. So great job on the detective's part on that. This is, I think, great. This is an article from Border Patrol once they started with the program, and one of their commanders in this article, he notes, he says, I'm proud that CBP has longstanding relationships with other law enforcement agencies from the local to federal levels. If one of these firearms we seized leads to solving an open case and taking a dangerous person off the streets, then all our efforts are worth it. And that's really the spirit of what this is all about, right? These guns that CBP is seizing on the border, where are they coming from? They're coming from Tucson. They're coming from Phoenix. They're being used in crimes in Tucson and Phoenix and other jurisdictions. Once CBP seizes those firearms on these people that are trying to traffic them to Mexico, their case is done. They don't have an obligation to get it into NIBIN, but they see the value in that, and they know it's not going to benefit their case, but it's going to potentially help solve a murder or armed robbery or home invasion in another jurisdiction. So that's really the spirit of all of this, and I just think it's phenomenal. 2012, again, this one down here is just talking about a hit that we got on a test fire return that we're still working. This is actually on a suspect that we were working in partnership with ATF on. It was a suspected home invasion individual that was involved in home invasions. We tried getting some undercover in there with him, and things just didn't pan out. So interesting, we had to release the gun back to him because he's not, it was taken in an investigation for his girlfriend possessing the gun. He's, believe it or not a prohibited possessor. So interesting application there, I think, with these guns being sold back out onto the streets. Now with our new laws, they'll be sold to licensed firearms dealers. Lot more potential for getting hits like those. So far this year, we held a 2-day version of the 13 Critical Tasks workshop just 2 weeks ago in Phoenix and in Tucson. And what we did is we kind of stole this idea from folks out in Florida, Steve Barberini and Lori Van Dusen, and we created a 1-day class that includes all these topics here, and we're going to be offering that class at other times now as well. But so we taught this class on day 1, which is basically a collaborative approach to gun investigations from beginning to end, including firearm and tool mark examination, forensic processing of firearms, a prosecutor perspective, all of those things for a collaborative, multifaceted gun investigation programs and strategies. So we did that on day 1. Day 2, we had the 13 critical tasks workshop. We had more than 180 attendees representing 30 law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies at the Phoenix workshop, and more than 80 attendees representing more than 15 law enforcement and prosecutorial agencies in Tucson. So lots of good stuff there. This slide just kind of illustrates how our hits are not just to Phoenix, but to agencies all around Phoenix and actually Arizona as a result of our regional approach. So some considerations that we'd like to share, that we've, like, kind of lessons learned kind of things. High volume of new users, so you need people to continually work with them and provide that ongoing training and mentoring, because as you know, it's a skill. If you're not doing entries and correlations, you're going to lose that skill. Everybody's doing that on a part-time basis, and by that I mean everybody that's doing this for their agency has other full-time responsibilities, whether they're a homicide detective or a property and evidence technician or they're property management personnel. They have other primary job responsibilities. So again, Pete would harp on me, that's not sustainable. So how can we, resolve that? Continued overemphasis on test fires. I use ATF as an example, not in a bad light, but what do they impound? They impound firearms. And so they give us, we've been entering their test fires throughout the past several years, so that increases our imbalance of test fires to scene casings. But again, you really want to focus on getting those scene casings in there. And then providing training and guidance in all these areas, especially with regard to storage and policies, education. Caliber prioritization program, we lost 3 personnel within the span of about 6 months last year, so we had to figure out how can we keep our NIBIN program going. We knew we couldn't enter everything into NIBIN, so what do we want to do? So we said, okay, we'll try to do a little bit of informal research. None of our folks, including myself, are researchers or have any kind of background in this. So we took our best effort at this. We looked at our acquisitions. FTI helped us out with this. They created reports for us. So we're looking at the most common caliber from our test fires and scene casings. We had a big sample of more than 30,000 dating back 10 years. We used our crime analysis unit to look at, okay, what are we impounding? Not everything that gets impounded actually gets entered. So what are we impounding? There's some data quality considerations that you have to consider with that. Then we looked at our confirmed hits. eTrace is a very powerful tool to help you evaluate this and looking at what you're bringing in. And then are there any differences between agencies? And what we found is, in looking at our confirmed hits, more than 80% of our confirmed hits involve 9s, 40s, or 45s. So right there, that's telling us if we just focused on those, we should start seeing an increased amount of success if we have to prioritize what we're entering. Obviously, revolvers, you cut those out as well. So what we created is a caliber prioritization program, and it's still a work in progress, but basically what we're doing is these calibers on the left are the ones that we actively solicit and we'll try to enter. If a case agent sends us something, we'll enter it, but these are the only ones that we're actively trying to solicit. It's important to take into account, if you're going to implement a program like that, emerging trends. Like in, probably in your jurisdictions also, these 5.7s are becoming very popular. So even though the database might not have a lot of those in there, we're test firing those. So you want to take stuff like that into consideration. 38 Super is a gun of choice for cartels down in Mexico. They like the 38 Supers. They will spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on a 38 Super that has all this gold and embossed and, I mean, just really fancy stuff. So those we're definitely getting in. 7.62s, 223s, and shotguns, as you guys are probably well familiar with, they leave pretty vanilla generic markings on there. They're harder to match up, but we see a lot of those, so we're entering those. So again, it's still a work in progress. Keys to making NIBIN work, and enter the most current evidence available as soon as possible. Make sure you get your DNA and latent print processing done first, if it's needed. One of the things that we do on our shoots is we're not wearing gloves. We're out at a range. We're shooting. We don't handle anything else associated with that firearm, the magazine, the ammo, the holster. So if we do get a hit and now the detective wants DNA or prints, all of those other items are available for processing. So that's something that we do. Efficient tracking and storage of what's been entered. And I had a question that came up on this, and I want to specify this. you've got to have good policies in place for retention of this evidence. Like with us, we used to destroy guns. We're still destroying them until this new law goes into effect. We realize that guns have to be released. Evidence scene casings, you can't destroy those. I can't emphasize that enough. If you're working with IBIS or NIBIN, you can't destroy those evidence scene casings because you'll enter it today and you might not get a hit. But 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, you may get a hit on that. And if you destroy those scene casings, your evidence is gone. With test fires, you need to retain those exemplars. And we actually just had a hit that resulted in an arrest. There was from two cases from 2007. And the hit was just identified. It was between Phoenix and Tempe. And the detective made an arrest on that. The gun's been destroyed, but we still have the test fires from that. So is it ideal? No, that's not an ideal case. But our county attorney understands that, and they're going to work with us on a case-by-case basis with those. This is just kind of illustrating. These are just a portion of our scene casings that have been entered into NIBIN. Those people are 5'0" like me. You can see how tall that is. So you got to work with your property management bureau closely. Pink stickers we put on the bags to designate what's been entered into NIBIN. There's just a handful of test fires that we've entered throughout the years. Again, communication with the case agents, property management bureau. Crime gun intelligence is huge. NIBIN plus E-Trace equals that crime gun intelligence concept that we're really promoting now. We're on board with. We have a crime gun intelligence contractor in Phoenix that ATF has hired. There's only 7 in the United States, so hopefully we'll see more of them. We all know about tracing and the abilities and the potential with that. Following the 13 critical tasks model, this mic is really bugging me. I'm glad we have like 2 more minutes. Other benefits of NIBIN, you can testify to the functionality of a firearm if that prosecutor wants a function test, and that might take 6 months or a year for your fire examiner to get to that. Do you really need a full-blown fire function test, or do you just need to know if you pulled the trigger and the gun went bang? If that's all you need to know, if you got it entered into NIBIN, the person that test fired can testify to that. It can help provide real-time analysis and case linkage. Useful, very useful in gang investigations. Hopefully you got a chance to see Rocky Edwards' Case Ops, Sherlock Ops program that he's developed. Programs like that can be very useful. I think Jamaica is creating a similar program as well. And so just to kind of close out, I'm going to play some excerpts from a 911 call. And this 911 call, the case that was highlighted in that video, this is the 911 call from that incident.
I need an emergency right away. My husband's bleeding all over. I don't know what happened. All right, let me get the fire department. Hurry. Hey, ma'am, you gotta hang on a second. Okay, please. Okay, hold on. Oh my God. Fire department, what's the address of the emergency? 5015 East Paseo Way. Is that a house? Yes. Your phone number, please? Please. 785-4692. What's wrong there? He's diabetic. I don't know what happened. He just came in from outside. He's bleeding all out of his mouth. He's on the floor. Okay, is he awake, ma'am? No. Is he breathing? I don't know. Hurry. Hey, ma'am? Yes? I want to help you with him while we're on the way. How old is he? He's 48. Okay. Diabetic. I want you to go next to him and see if he's breathing. Okay, hold on.
Because we're running short on time, I'm going to skip to the next part here. So she finds him, he's not breathing. She proceeds to give him CPR.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ma'am, you're doing a great job. Any idea who would have shot him? I think he's dead. I'm so sorry. Oh my God. If you can, continue, ma'am. Continue. Any idea who would have done this? No, he just got off the floor a few minutes ago. He was just sitting in the garage. I just talked to him. Okay. Sweetie, how far out are you? I'm trying to find out.
So this is that human element that I was talking about early on, and it just highlights the importance of what you all are doing here today, and that's why we're we're at this conference and we do what we do. If these agencies weren't participating in NIBIN and we didn't find that little .22 caliber casing, this senseless act would have gone probably unsolved still here today. So again, just kind of highlights the importance of what we're doing here. This is just illustrating how it's 3 different cities spread out. What basically these guys were doing home invasions. They saw him as an easy target. He was hanging out in his garage. They were going up to commit a home invasion and to rob him. He was on the phone. He was actually talking to a friend in Colorado. And they panicked. They thought he was calling police, and they shot and killed him. A completely senseless act that turned this family's life upside down. So just really highlights the importance of NIBIN and what FTI does and what you all are doing. So in closing, this is our webpage. This video, lots of other links and information is available on this webpage. There's my contact information, so feel free to call me, email me if any questions come up down the road. If there's anything I can do for you, happy to help out in any way possible. I like to throw those pictures in for Canadian friends up here, show the Coyotes beating up on them. Which probably doesn't happen very often. Coyotes didn't make the playoffs this year, but so that's it. I was pretty close on time. Sorry I had to rush through it. Sorry I had to stand at this podium. I'm very self-conscious about standing here. It's very uncomfortable. Questions? Everybody's ready to go? All right. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you guys sticking it out.